WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has released a new batch of leaked emails connected to Democratic candidate for president Hillary Clinton. Among the materials made public are a series of emails from the personal email account of Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta. The emails reveal that the Clinton campaign has been receiving policy instructions from billionaire globalist and former Nazi collaborator George Soros. Soros is known for having helped to fund the radical elements in Ukraine, including neo-Nazi extremists who rose up in protest against the country's pro-Russian government. The Soros-funded extremists created mass chaos in the streets through vandalism, threats, and violence against the police. The protests, which were coordinated with the assistance of the CIA, led to the complete overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014. The way that Soros manipulates social and political change on a grand scale is by funneling his money through his own charities and into innocuous-sounding social movement groups. In reality, these groups are generally violent extremists with their own private agendas. But these are agendas that suit the needs of Soros's own larger agenda. Just as he funded extremist groups in Ukraine, in America, Soros has funded similar extremist groups, most notably Black Lives Matter. Revolutionary groups like Black Lives Matter are inherently unintelligent and easy to manipulate. They are quick to accept money from Soros in exchange for conducting protests using the dross of society, such as the hopeless and unemployed young black men from America's ghettos. The Washington Times reported in August that Soros has given at least $33 million to Black Lives Matter, giving him significant influence and control over the group. He funnels his money to groups through his various charities, the largest of which is called the Open Society Foundation. The ultimate goal of George Soros and his fellow globalists is the creation of a one-world socialist government. It is essentially the same goal that was pursued by the Soviet communists that led to revolutions and uprisings all around the world in the 20th century. Soros wants to bring about radical changes to laws and systems inside the United States of America that reduce the power of our own national sovereignty. Until the mighty United States can be brought to heel, our nation stands in the way of that one-world government. The reason that America is powerful is because of our people. Our people are free to make their own choices. Despite some flaws, our capitalist system is simply the greatest engine for prosperity in the world. This national attitude toward individual choice and freedom is enshrined in our nation's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Our laws and systems are limited in their powers by the overarching control of the Constitution and its Bill of Rights. Because our founding fathers made it so hard to amend or change the U.S. Constitution, globalists like George Soros who want to change our system of government must work outside the law. There must be mass chaos. The people must live in so much fear of the violence of the radical elements that they willingly give up their freedoms to the government in exchange for promises of security. There must be violence in our streets in order to bring about the destabilization of our society. And just as Soros pitted the ideological radicals like the white supremacists against the mainstream social class in Ukraine, in America he is pitting ideological radical black supremacists against the mainstream social class, which happens to be predominantly white. One of the steps in Soros's plan is to help put our local police forces under federal control. In essence, Soros is trying to create a national police force, a Gestapo similar to the SS used by Hitler to control the German population. This agenda is revealed in some of the emails made public by WikiLeaks. It shows that not only is George Soros sending instructions to the globalist puppet Hillary Clinton on which policies he wants implemented, but they show that Clinton is using the exact propaganda phrases dictated to her by Soros. I'll give you an example. George Soros passes his instructions on to Clinton directly, but he uses intermediaries as well. The most notable is Chris Stone, the president of Soros's Open Society Foundation. In some of the emails that Chris Stone sent to Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, Stone instructed the Clinton camp to use the phrase implicit bias when speaking about the police. Implicit bias means that police are naturally racist towards blacks. It's something that they don't choose to feel. It's just a part of who they are, and they simply can't help it. And because police can't control their inherent racism, It is therefore necessary for the federal government to establish a system of control over the local police in order that they behave justly toward the black community. As was reported by the Daily Caller last month, internal Open Society Foundation documents say that the mainstreaming of implicit bias is meant to serve as a foundation from which to overhaul the nation's anti-discrimination laws and make it easier to file racial discrimination lawsuits by eliminating the need to prove intent. As it stands today, police are considered innocent of the charges of racism unless it can be proven in court that they intended to be racist. The goal of Soros' Open Society Foundation is to create laws and systems that automatically assume that police are guilty of racism because this bias is implicit. Here's an excerpt from one of the emails released by WikiLeaks between Stone and Podesta. It's from December of 2015. Chris Stone writes, "Hi John, your policy team asked me for ideas on police reform a couple of months ago. Here's a concrete idea I've written up and a good hook for it in Chicago." Stone attached to the email an article that he wrote advocating putting federally funded bureaucrats in charge of police oversight. John Podesta replied, "Thanks, Chris. We'll circulate. Hope all is well." To which Chris Stone responded, "Doing as well as can be. We are now officially and formally undesirable in Russia. Hope you're thriving. From where I sit, looks like things are good for your team." Setting aside the felony violations of federal election laws going on between Podesta and Snow, I want to draw your attention for a moment to the content of the article that Stone attached to this email. The article, ironically entitled, "Get the Politics Out of Policing," included a diatribe by Stone that talked about, quote, a police culture of contempt for black lives. He said that what is dividing America is religion and violent policing. He writes, "The good news is that other countries haunted by police violence have figured out how to do this." And he goes on to praise the much-lauded terrorist Nelson Mandela and describes nations in which the federal government has oversight over the local police forces, a model which the Soros Foundation wants to see Hillary Clinton implement. But how has Clinton responded to these directives from George Soros? Is Hillary Clinton acting like a good puppet and parroting Soros's lines about the implicit bias of police? Here's an excerpt from Clinton's first presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Secretary Clinton, last week you said we've got to do everything possible to improve policing, to go right at implicit bias. Do you believe that police are implicitly biased against black people?
Lester, I think implicit bias is a problem for everyone, not just police. I think, unfortunately, too many of us in our great country jump to conclusions about each other. And therefore, I think we need all of us to be asking hard questions about, why am I feeling this way? But when it comes to policing, since it can have literally fatal consequences, I have said in my first budget we would put money into that budget to help us deal with implicit bias by retraining a lot of our police officers. They want support. They want more training. They want more assistance. And I think the federal government could be in a position where we would offer and provide that.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence speaks for itself. Hillary Clinton is a pawn being used by much more powerful people. She's a tool in the hands of a cartel of globalists and Zionist bankers who are hell-bent on taking over control of America and wresting the rights of the American people away from us. Perhaps no presidential election in modern history has been as contentious, as confusing, or as dangerous as the one before us in 2016. What is going on in America today reminds me of a story I once read about an ancient civilization that once existed in the Americas. The people were called the Nephites. They had thrived as a democracy for centuries, but then an ever-growing cabal of conspirators called the Gadiantans began to infiltrate the Nephite government. They got their members placed into positions of power in both the legislature and the judiciary. The author of the story called their conspiracies secret combinations. This author was a former military general named Moroni, who had watched his nation tear itself apart because of the chaos and strife perpetrated by these Gadiantans. And when the Nephite nation was attacked by an outside power known as the Lamanites, they couldn't defend themselves because of their own weakness. The Lamanites and Nephites fought until the entire Nephite civilization was destroyed. General Moroni escaped the slaughter, but remained in a constant state of flight to keep from being captured by the Lamanites who were hunting him. His final act was to record the story of the annihilation of his people. He engraved the story on metal plates so that the story would be preserved for ages to come. He gave this final warning to those future generations who would come across the story of the fall of the Nephite nation. He warned us to not let these, quote, murderous combinations get above you, which are built up to get power and gain, and that the conspiracies of the people like the Gadiantans seek to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries, and brings to pass the destruction of all people, for it is built up by the devil, who is the father of all lies. I see what's going on in our country. I see that wicked people like George Soros, David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, people in positions of high power in both government and private industry, collaborating together for their mutual benefit at the expense of the freedoms and liberties of the people. They truly are engaged in secret combinations, and if we let their conspiracies go unchallenged, they are going to bring to pass the destruction of our people. And if you don't think that the destruction of America is near at hand, then you need to study what's going on in Syria between the United States and Russia. And you need to get the facts on the global economic meltdown that's already in its early stages. We must defeat these conspirators. We might not be able to dethrone the mighty George Soros, but we do have a fighting chance to stop his puppet, Hillary Clinton, from taking power. God help us if she does. For ongoing discussion of these issues, subscribe to my channel at www.youtube.com/prepare333. For the End Times News Report, this is Jake Morphonios.